Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Mental Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the new ZT-0556 automatic, which is interesting because I don't think ZT has ever done an automatic knife before. And it's also interesting because titanium framed automatic knives are pretty rare. This isn't the first one ever, obviously, but it is rare to see a titanium auto. This is along the lines of what ZT's been doing in recent years, which was making smaller, more compact knives. This has definitely not been to everyone's, like not everybody is incredibly excited that ZT doesn't do a lot of big burly knives anymore and they make smaller ones, right? I am actually part of that crowd who remembers fondly the years where ZT was making this larger stuff. So I'm a little bit biased, but I'm going to do my best to give you guys the pros and the cons to this design and let you guys know exactly what I think. Thanks so much to ZT/Kai USA for sending this in. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. There is a link for this knife down in the description. It does help my channel when you use those links before you buy something, but that's up to you. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this knife. It's not tiny. It's not like a micro knife. It's just very compact and thin. The knife comes in at about 7.75 and maybe about 7.65 inches. So it's not small. I'd call it a medium knife. Blade length is coming in about 3.35. Cutting edge is a little bit over 3 1/4. How about some size comparisons? Any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and Others. So up against the AD10 and the AD20.5, closer to the size of the AD20.5, but way more cutting edge. In fact, the blade to handle ratio of this knife is really good. Up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3, closer to the size of the Para 3, way more cutting edge. And truthfully, it's got more cutting edge than the PM2. So that's kind of neat. Let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. It's actually, if you like the ratios of the Hogue Deca, it's actually got more cutting edge than the Hogue Deca as well, despite being shorter overall. How's the action on this knife? Very good. It feels very similar to a Kershaw Launch Series knife, which is no surprise, right? If you didn't know, Kershaw and ZT are both under Kai USA, so it's likely that the mechanism that's being used to deploy this knife, the coil spring, is exactly the same as a lot of Launch Series knives, right? My thing with an auto is I don't really care how powerful it is. I mean, it's definitely, I don't want it to be too powerful. I want it to deploy into the open position when I push the button, obviously. This is kind of the area where I test it. If I get the blade about right here and let it go and hold the button down, is the spring strong enough to keep it going into the open position? And the answer is yes, right? It's not quite as powerful as a lot of ProTech knives, right? Especially the full-size ones. So if you're expecting it to kick that hard, not really. This is still strong enough that if you hand it from Larry from Parts, who doesn't know a lot about high-end knives, there's a 50% chance it'll fly out of his hand, right? So it's still definitely on the more powerful side and definitely, has the quality that you would expect with the ZT name, right? They just didn't create like a particularly powerful auto for zero tolerance. A lot of people are saying that this should basically have just been another launch knife, and I guess it could have been. I mean, they would not have made this out of titanium for sure. Kershaw doesn't do titanium knives generally with their USA stuff. If they did, this would be exact. It's not like stamping Kershaw on the blade is going to magically make this cost less, right? I have my own qualms with the price tag, and we're going to get to that, but we can't just stamp Kershaw on this and have it magically cost less. It would still be expensive to do, given that this is a legitimately USA-made item. The action does feel good, just not special, I guess. Does that make sense? I do like the firing button. That's part of the the experience. You get to lay your finger down on it feels like a specialized firing switch, right? And there's something to that. It definitely does feel better than just the standard like circle button. So that's kind of neat. But overall, a good experience, not really anything absolutely spectacular or unexpected. Let's do carry profile. Thickness up against the Para 3, very thin. Not in a bad way. It doesn't make it feel delicate or, fragile or anything like that. And also the edges are not sharp. So it's not absolutely the most comfortable thing in the world, but it is nice and compact in a good way, right? Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. This is a super duper easy knife to carry. No real surprises here. It is lightweight, compact, but not tiny. I want to make sure that, that's getting across. Weight on this guy. So materials, we have titanium, we have carbon fiber, We got steel for the clip, and then we have MagnaCut for the blade. And I don't think I mentioned this at the beginning. What is the HRC of the MagnaCut? It's safe to assume that they do it the exact same way as Kershaw when Kershaw uses MagnaCut, right? I believe the community or members of our community who have access to proper testing equipment have tested Kershaw's MagnaCut, and I think the result is that it's pretty good, right? Furthermore, on KaiUSA's own website, they have a Learn About Steel section where they list MagnaCut in general as being a steel that is optimally in the 62 to 64 territory. It would be a pretty bold move for them to list that optimal range in a Learn About Steel section on their own website and then not get their own MagnaCut to those very same numbers. So my guess is that's where the MagnaCut is. This knife did not go through any crazy test. I'm a design reviewer, right? So I just put this in my pocket and used it like a regular knife. If it was really, really soft, the edge would have fatigued really fast, and it didn't. Just cutting some cardboard and things like that, it seems fine, right? But I don't know the actual HRC range, and I really wish ZT, KaiUSA, guys, put it on your website. Like, put it right there on the website so that nobody has to guess. That way we can, I don't know why companies won't do that. Just give us the range and put it right there under the knife on each individual listing. That would be great. Anyways, that's what we're looking at for materials there. Your weight on this guy, pretty lightweight. It's going to come in. We actually have to change the unit to, there we go. 2.4 ounces. That is very, very lightweight, and that means the ratios are really good given that you have a 3.65 or 3.7 inch, that's wrong, 3.35 inch blade, sorry. But still, very good ratios there. Your balance is going to be really, really good right there behind where the pivot is on this side. A lot of people, if you're like me, this is going to be too lightweight. Not that it's necessarily bad. I'm just saying it's so lightweight that you might forget that it's in your pocket, right? So it depends on who you are. But for me, I remembered that it was there, luckily. But it is the size of knife and the weight of knife that makes me forget sometimes and wash it. So just be cognizant of that. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. So the pivot is a T8. Yeah, and then your body screws are all going to be, was that loose? It was entirely my imagination. Okay. I felt like the pivot was loose. It's not loose at all. But then the body screws are going to be T6. That's not really that big of a deal. The thing that's going to be irritating for some people is the fact that it's an automatic knife. If you've never taken one of these apart, not the most fun experience. It's totally possible, but you have to hold things in place and there's tension, right? Tape the blade off. I learned the hard way, as most people do. I don't need to tape it off. I'm sure it's not that hard, and yeah. So not incredibly fun, but definitely doable. If you're gonna do it, tape the blade off. You'll be happy, right? I should note that the way that this pocket clip mounts is pretty cool. We have one of the screws back here going all the way through to the other side, and then there's like a tab, like the pocket clip is nested into the titanium. So you might be wondering, like, where is this other screw, or is there another screw holding this in? No, in fact, so you have the same aesthetic as like a knife that's just got two body screws, and then the pocket clip is just screwed to the front of it, but it's wraparound, and then there's a screw that goes in but doesn't thread all the way through the titanium, and then it uses one of the standoff screws, which is nice because that means it can be mounted for left or right-handed carry. You can see the slot there, and then you don't have to look at anything else aside from what you would normally have to look at, which is two screws. In this case, on this side, it's just the head of the screw that's going all the way through. That's a nice way to do that, and it's accommodating for left-handed people, so I think that's pretty cool. But anyways, we did the weights. We need to measure the blade stock thickness here real quick, which would be easier if I knew exactly where those blasted calipers were. I don't know why. There they are. They have fallen behind the toolbox. This is a really, really thin blade. I want to say it's probably like 90 thousandths. And it feels good to cut with for sure, but it's definitely on the more delicate side. Yeah, 87 thousandths. Definitely thin, but you're going to make good use of that MagnaCut blade. Hardware check, weight, blade stock thickness. Let's move into the meat and potatoes. So this is another small, compact ZT knife. And, people just really want ZT to make something big again. And my thing is, I think it's okay for them to make smaller things periodically, but why are they so dead set on transitioning zero tolerance, which was such a specific, like, when I thought ZT, I had such a specific idea of the knives in my head. And it gave them, I guess, personality. It gave like, I don't know, kind of like depth and definition to the brand. And they have transitioned away from that and are now almost exclusively making these very non-memorable, just sort of whatever compact knives that just just blend in perfectly with an ocean of stuff that's similar. And again, we can argue this is a titanium auto, which ZT has never done, and is rare in general, right? Yeah, that'd be cool if like this was just one of many different things that ZT did, right? They have the 0308, which was the only robust, like truly robust thing that they've made in years. But everything else has just been super small. I think that something like this would be fine if they had variety. I don't think that there's anything wrong with ZT being a variety brand, right? If they wanted to pull away from being almost exclusively the big burly stuff and just add some variety, that would be fine. But they've been like, you know what? We're tossing all the big stuff and we're only going to make very, very straightforward, plain Jane, lightweight, compact stuff. And then occasionally we'll make like one thing that's not that. That's weird, right? So on one hand, like I get like the comment section is going to be filled with complaints on this, that and the price tag, which we're going to get to. Some of the price tag complaints are justified and some of them are not. I think that a lot of it is just blind parroting, but we're going to get to that. But yeah, I get those complaints, right? I understand that as somebody who really loved specifically the 2010 to 2017 era of zero tolerance. Era, is that the right word? The time period, right? Ergonomically, it's not bad for a lightweight, thin, compact knife. They've done the edges really, really well, as is the case with all knives that are super thin, right, and very narrow. It's just not going to be the most comfortable thing in the world, but for what they were working with, they did a pretty good job. I can get a full grip on this. Nothing feels sharp, and I especially love the little pocket clip. People always complain about little clips. I think maybe subconsciously some of you guys think that because the clip is small, it's going to make it easier to come out of your pocket. Probably not, because the total amount of surface contact between the clip and the frame is the same regardless of the length of the clip, right? So if you're going to make that argument, it doesn't really make sense. If you're going to talk about the depth of the clip needing to be deeper in order to make sure that the knife stays in your pocket, maybe if you spend a lot of time upside down. But for the most part, I don't think the depth of the clip is really going to matter all that much. It might make a slight difference, but I think we would need a lot of test subjects to prove if that was really going to make for a major issue. For me, the main benefit is it does what a clip should do, and the clip bill doesn't go into the middle of my hand while I'm squeezing on it, right? So it feels okay. Ergonomics, I might give it a B-, right? Maybe a C+ is okay. The jimping's nice. They actually added functional jimping to it. The blade is nice and thin. It's very, very slicey. It glides through material right. The cutting edge feels great. Like I said, the Magna Cut on this did not fatigue immediately, so I know it has to be at least reasonably well heat treated. I'd be really surprised if they did it any different than on their Kershaw knives, or again, outside of that range that they list on their own website as being optimal. So the overall look is nice. They did a good job with the carbon fiber. They gave it to us on both sides. They added little milling lines to the titanium here. It's got a little bit of character. It's just not really anything like, I look at this and I'm like, cool, make it huge. Like, had ZT made a giant, like 9-inch burly auto, people would have crapped their pants. That would have been awesome. But instead we got a small, like a good gentleman's EDC auto knife. And they did a good job with what they did here. But in this territory of the knife world, I don't think it's what everybody wanted ZT to do. And again, we're going to talk about that, because what we want isn't what everyone wants, right? We like to think that we represent the whole of the community and that we are the most important. But we are a small group of people. I know that sounds silly coming from somebody who runs a channel with close to 700,000 subscribers, but you have to understand the scope of the knife world as a whole is far, far larger. We still represent, me included in that group, we still represent a small part of the demographic of ZT knives and the knife community all the way around. So on the blade, as has always been the case, it has a big ZT logo. I really wish that they had made that smaller. In fact, on all ZT knives, I wish that it was smaller. ZT does a really good job with their satin finish. I think this is a machine satin finish that looks really, really good. I have a nice flat here. The blade is very, very generic. Nothing incredibly special going on here. The cutting bevel looks good. A little tiny bit of a smile back here, not much. Really, it does look good. The factory edge is nice, right? It's very slicey, very pokey. Not a knife that you're going to want to do any hard use cutting tasks with. It's a simple auto. They were clearly going for the EDC enthusiast, gentlemanly crowd, right? And yeah, that's who it looks like it's for, right? The pocket clip, I'm going to check real quick. I'm almost certain that it is in fact steel. You know, what would be super great is if the magnet was also in exactly the, there it is. We should probably deploy the blade because the blade is definitely steel, right? Yeah, the pocket clip is steel. Had they done a titanium clip with this being made in the USA, it would have really increased the price tag, so probably a good idea. But yeah, the blade's good. It's fairly comfortable. It feels good. Like using this knife is a pretty straightforward experience. It does cut really well and it feels nice. It's a good, reliable, automatic EDC design, right? Your lanyard hole is non-existent, which nobody really cares about anymore unless you really love lanyard holes, in which case you're going to be SOL. Left-handed people, like I said, you can mount this for lefty carry. You'll just be operating the automatic with your index finger, which is a little tricky, but it can definitely be done. Your stop pin is located back here, so just typical stop pin. There is no blade plate up, down, left, or right. It looks like this runs, I'm almost certain that this runs on phosphor bronze washers. You can see in there where we have phosphor bronze. So that's nice, right? Not likely that anything's going to get super duper dirty, but it does feel nice and smooth. There's a nice click into the closed position. You can sort of push this and feel a little bit of movement, but that's typical for automatic knives. We also have pretty close to perfect centering. It may have come slightly off from me firing it a whole bunch of times, so I'm going to tighten down that pivot and see if I can get that blade back to center without altering the firing action here, just to see if that's the case. So did we come back to center? Not really. We are ever so slightly off. The firing action feels exactly the same though, so that's nice. Yeah, it looks like maybe it's ever so slightly off, which, yeah, man, that's real. Yeah, it is ever so slightly to the right. I could probably mess with the body screws and get it perfectly centered, but I would just prefer that it came centered from the factory, given what this is and what year it is, right? So I can probably center it, but it's a little bit annoying. All right, so what do I think of this? Hold on with the price tag 1 second. This is a knife that is catering to the target area. Like, this is always so confusing for people because they look at ZT and they're like, ZT is a brand that has only ever catered to us, the enthusiasts, like the internet knife community enthusiasts, right? So why would they make things that we don't like? The problem with that statement is we are not the entirety of their demographic. They have a massive, massive demographic. They clearly must be doing some things okay. They have definitely made ZT as a brand much smaller, but they must be doing something right because the brand is still here and they're still making a lot of the same stuff, right? So it's probably that the different crowds where all these different retailers, these big chains that carry ZT knives, these must be truly appealing to different groups, right? And they must be selling enough of them through all the different, online retail sites and the different physical stores and wherever. They must be selling enough that this change and these designs are justified, right? Might not be what we want, but it apparently is for somebody, right? The price tag, $360. A lot of people were really upset with that. Is that fair? Prices on everything have gone up, right? So across the board, we're seeing that. If you compare this to Benchmade, like let's say Benchmade made this, do you guys know how expensive this would be if it just had a Benchmade butterfly on it, titanium and magnica and an automatic? Benchmade would be this would be a $550 knife, right? That's not really fair to compare it with Benchmade because their prices are ridiculous, right? So let's compare it with ProTech. Okay, ProTech tends to be right around the 250 to 275 mark on a lot of stuff, sometimes a little less. But while they do use MagnaCut and CPM 20CV in a lot of cases, their frames are aluminum. A lot of people always say, just because it's titanium doesn't mean it makes that much of a difference. Titanium isn't that expensive of a material. When you consider all of the milling that you have to do, and you're considering the tolerances, and you're considering the upkeep on those machines, and all of the little teeny tiny costs associated with doing that and doing that in the United States, yes, it is expensive. Yes, it is. Absolutely. Otherwise, we would be seeing stuff like this all the time. And I mean specifically titanium US knives that are at or under $250. We are not seeing that. It doesn't exist. It's no coincidence, right? And anybody who thinks otherwise, this is my advice to you. Get a loan, buy those machines, make your own knives, undercut the entire US knife market, and become a millionaire overnight by your own numbers. I mean, seriously, if it's so possible, do it. I will review your knife, and if it's awesome, I will help you become a famous knife supplier. We don't see this, right? I'm not out there under machines and calculating every last teeny tiny little cost, but common sense tells me that this is exponentially more expensive, especially when, it's done in the United States, right? So if you don't need titanium, buy a ProTech. It's not that ZT's charging too much with this example. It's that you're comparing aluminum to titanium and you don't need the titanium, right? So I'm trying to be on the fair side and the not fair side of this. Most comparable, I think Hogue has some titanium and MagnaCut or titanium and CPM 20CV folding knives that are a little bit less, but even those are still up over $300. So is the $360 for this too much? I think so, but for the people saying that it should cost like $250 or $200 or less, you guys that's ridiculous. They can't do it. They can't, right? Again, if you think they can, do it and send me your knife. I'll review it, right? But that type of stuff just doesn't exist at that price point. The bigger issue here is that the audience that watches my content, right? A lot of you guys are the same people who loved ZT from 2010 to 2017. So over time, we have witnessed ZT be something that we all loved to something that we don't love as much because the stuff that they're making just isn't for us, right? Now, it could be that nobody's buying this stuff, right? It could very well be. But if I'm blocking everything else out and I'm trying to be perfectly fair and perfectly honest, this is a lightweight, well-made, lightweight EDC titanium auto with presumably a well heat-treated blade. It cuts well, right? It's not really a hard use knife. It also carries well, and it feels nice to deploy, right? It feels slightly high in price, but not outrageous, right? Not like, oh my gosh, Benchmade or oh my gosh, James Brand. Like, it's not that outrageous. I think people are just automatically, they're so ready to, fire their harpoons at ZT that we don't sit down and question like what we're comparing, right? If you're going to compare a Chinese knife, that argument's out the window immediately, right? I'm not saying that, USA knives are better just because they're made in the USA. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying it just is made in the USA. It's going to cost more, right? If you don't care about the USA factor, go buy a Chinese knife. I promise you, they are plentiful. You don't even have to bother. If you don't care about the USA thing, don't even worry about it because there's so many Chinese knives. You won't get through 2% of the list before you die. There's a ton of them. You don't need to bother with this, right? But if you're looking at a ZT, you might care about the US thing. And if you do, you just kind of have to deal with the fact that USA manufacturing, especially when we're considering MagnaCut and titanium, is just going to cost more money, right? So I don't think that the super dramatic complaints about the price tag are completely and totally justified, but I do think that it's a little bit high. As somebody who really loved the 2010 to 2017 ZT, this does not directly appeal to me, but it's okay, right? It's not terrible. It's just not my favorite thing, and it's a little overpriced, I think, for what it is. Had this come in at like $300, $325, I would have been like, okay, yeah, that's fair, right? That's about what I expect. That's like, for example, where the narrows should be. The Benchmade narrows should definitely be about 300 to 325, right? Maybe 350 max. That's where that should be, right? So I feel like ZT's definitely more fair in their pricing than Benchmade. But they did a decent job. I'm just waiting for them to make something that's truly big, right? Just larger and more burly. So I don't know. It's okay. It's not something, I mean, I think you guys knew coming into this video, like it's not something that I'm going to celebrate, right? It's just like, all right, here it is, you know, it's fine. Some people are going to like this. Like if you like the idea of a lightweight, compact, automatic titanium knife with a nice thin edge, right, and good materials, then you will like this, especially if you're big into the USA stuff. But it needs to be specifically that, and you need to come from a part of the community that wasn't obsessed with the 2010 to 2017 zero tolerance, right? If you're like coming from the outside and you're like, ZT, who's that, right? Then if you check off all those other boxes, like if that's your thing, then maybe you'll like this, right? So that's all I have to say about it, right? Some people were really, really upset about this. I'm not really upset about it. I'm just kind of, it just doesn't really wow me, right? It's cool to see ZT doing something like a titanium auto. It's cool to see them doing something slightly different. I just need a lot more different before I find it really interesting or want to spend money for myself, right? Thanks again to ZT for sending it in anyway, though. I appreciate that. Links for this guy will be down in the description. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.